NLX2 crew, we're back at it. I gave a little brief intro of our dude, Tex Mcquilkin. Showed a picture, and I mean, you're standing next to John in the block one, and it doesn't do any justice for your height. But it's going to be a good one, guys. Pretty excited about what we got going on here. Had Luke on last week, Tex, and hopefully the big man here down the road. And let's just have you intro yourself real quick, and we'll start rolling.
Excellent. The Tex Mcquilkin, the Director of Training and Education at Power Athlete and well-traveled coach. I began my coaching career as a graduate assistant coach for Marymount University men's lacrosse. And from there, I had my first responsibility for athletes. I grew up in Texas and started playing lacrosse because I was a JV football player and didn't see an opportunity to step on the field in the Friday Night Lights. It is a real thing. If you've seen the movie, not the TV show, trust me when I say this, high school is not that dramatic. But the stick was new to me. The sense, the game, it was new to me, but I was able to find success as an athlete merely because I was stronger and not faster, but essentially had the football instincts of downhill, so where I was able to step in the right direction, people paid for it. My hard work and leadership showed through it. I was a 4-year starter, 3-year captain for my team, and then coach gave me the opportunity to become part of the coaching staff. And I was out recruiting kids that had an instinct and a feel for the game that I never developed. And how I was communicating them that first summer of recruiting following my final playing year, I felt lost and inadequate as a coach and decided where I could make my impact with the team would be through strength and conditioning. I lifted weights my entire life, started lifting weights in 6th grade in Texas football. This is what we did. I would train at the track. So we would go out, we'd lift weights, we'd run fast, and then I would coach them up in lacrosse for what I knew. That was going to be my impact for the team. But my first session with my athletes, who were my former teammates, who were still my friends, I asked them to kick up into a handstand. Imagine 40 dudes up against the wall, kick up into a handstand because we didn't have a full gym. And one of my athletes tore their rotator cuff. And I took away their final season of lacrosse because I didn't know what the hell I was doing. That moment in time, I needed to find someone who would coach and teach me the world of strength and conditioning. I didn't accept just doing what I did in high school or asking my friends to email me workouts that they did at their collegiate football programs as players. That would no longer cut it. I need to find a mentor in this realm. This is September 2009, and that's where I found Wellborn, and CrossFit football was just underway. And at that point, I saw they were leading seminars and doing something, so I spent my last dollar to fly out to Oakland, California, and attend the 5th ever CrossFit football seminar, and that's where I met John and Rafael Ruiz, who 5 years later would take on a greater role in my life. But that was my first representation of true strength conditioning coach, right? Not football coach who was teaching us to lift weights and run. It wasn't me leading workouts as an athlete in my weight room that didn't know what the hell I was doing. It was a true representation of a coach. The presence, the intelligence, the emotional display that they were able to control, empower, and take me as an athlete where I couldn't take myself. I then had the opportunity to take the lessons gleaned from only 2 days, and there was a lot of them, back to my Division III lacrosse team and truly learn how to coach. I had a lot of eggs to break, fortunately. Like, these kids were not good athletes. You know, we're a bottom tier Division III school. So I was allowed to make mistakes. I had my sport coach trust me, and I was still coaching the sport itself. And man, I really learned how to coach, how not to coach, how to write a program, how not to write a program, what not to do before a game, and understand this thing called movement up until a point. And then from Marymount, coaching both lacrosse and strength and conditioning, self-proclaimed strength coach for the team. I committed. I decided I was a hell of a better strength coach than I was a lacrosse coach. So applied to Georgetown University right across the river from Marymount and took my first job as strength and conditioning coach for college. At that time as well, it synced and linked up. This is 3 years following my first seminar across the football. That Wellborn, Luke, put up the flare for they're hiring a new coach or it's looking for two new coaches. Callie Hinsman, who was my training partner and helping me out at my full-time job, which was managing a gym, we both applied, and then we both ended up getting the job. So as I took on new responsibilities as a collegiate strength and conditioning coach, on weekends I was able to assist with the CrossFit football seminar. And, from there it was, all right, here's the books you got to read. And then I had these athletes whose scholarship was now in my hands. And the sports that I was working with, men's and women's lacrosse, but my full responsibility was the crew team, men's and women's crew at Georgetown. And then just assist with the lacrosse teams for the programs those coaches were writing and help them, unfold, empower, communicate, and do all those good things. But the crew team was special because I had my first true responsibility where I had to work with a sport coach that I wasn't friends with. Yeah. Okay, this is your goal. All right, here's how we're going to get there. Or this is how I see us accomplishing that. This is why running miles is stupid, right? So work on my communication with the sport coach, but really, learn a lot of lessons in developing that relationship with the coach at the time. So that was an eye-opening experience of me then aiming to display my knowledge, which then I could apply to her athletes. Certainly is a learning experience, man. And dude, I could go on and on about like who I am and where I've been, but that's just the beginning. And I know one of the topics you want to touch on is sport coach relationships. So that was the first time that it was a social intelligence for strength and conditioning, not just understanding the X's and O's, being able to identify what they want to accomplish as a sport coach, and then articulating it from what you want to do in the weight room to then what they need you to do.
Yeah. You brought up a few really good points, and we came to almost the same realization pretty early. I played college football, started all 4 years, was a above average football player, but I found that I enjoyed the preparation, the movement, the training for that said sport more than I enjoyed the sport. And it took a little while. I would say probably junior, senior year before I really realized like I'm getting pumped for the off season. I'm preparing for the in season. I am actually displaying all this stuff, but I'm enjoying the off season. And so I found that, you just obviously went through that same thing. You started out as a sports coach. I started out teaching or coaching D-line as a GA. And so that was a lot of fun, but it was ends to the means. I was trying to get into the weight room very quickly. And then you talk about that friend versus coach relationship a little bit. And I ran into that right off the bat. I was a GA. I had just played with all these dudes. And it's a very humbling experience to be one, because these guys still, the good ones are going to teach, or they're going to treat you as a coach. And these more immature athletes are going to think that you're still their friend. And so finding that true balance between coach and friend, I've seen be the downfall for many coaches, and I'm sure you have as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah, man. And that I had a real talk with my sport coach. He's still there, Coach Reynolds, great dude. still pals, but man, he laid down the lumber with me, and it was on a spring break trip. Lacrosse is a spring sport, and 1, 2, 3 games, and then you hit spring break in the season, and you get to do some awesome trip to Florida or California or somewhere sunny, away from the East Coast snow, to play some games. And I just fell into, we weren't doing anything stupid, but just like joking around and hanging out with the guys on the side versus the coaching staff. And he told me straight up, like, what, you want to be a player, you want to be a boy, or you want to step up and be the leader in a different respect. So I was forced into that conversation early, and put on the coaching cap, but had respect amongst the guys to, and I wasn't an asshole.
Yeah.
So I was able to then command, and they would listen to what I would say. It was just a direction off the sideline versus a direction from the field, the game.
Yeah. It was a humbling experience. I'm glad that you almost have to have that sit down talk with all those guys before, because if the line's not drawn, it's going to be crossed. And I've had my high school football coach. He was an assistant coach. He was then my head coach as a senior, and it was way too much of a friend relationship. It benefited me at the time, but down the road, it actually was a very bad thing for him. And so I've been able to, and you guys instill this in the Block One, and being that example, being that leader for all these people, as you guys set that example for us. And so let's kind of rewind just a little bit. You were managing a gym, and where was that at?
Washington, D.C.
Oh.
So coaching the D3 sport doesn't pay the bills. So managing a gym in D.C., DuPont Circle area, and that's where Callie and I crossed paths and hit it off immediately, and then have been pals for over a decade now.
Yep. And for people that don't know or had the pleasure of meeting Ruiz, I want you to kind of dive into that guy as a person. You said he took on a bigger role, and first off, it was just this person, somebody held to this pedestal, and then he's really been an example and had a pivotal role in your coach's journey.
Infinitely, and the beauty of that hero's journey, and if you look up Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, it's almost to a T that I could label each of these representations or moments that he speaks about of going into the abyss or finding the spiritual guide, and Ruiz would be that person. When I ran into Ruiz for the second time, I had reached a glass ceiling for the collegiate coaching attempt. And I say attempt because it never went beyond the Georgetown. Like, I was taking internships at University of Texas to try to get to know and expand my network to then potentially get a job, but then just ended up back at Georgetown. And then there was positionings opening up that coaches they weren't offering up me. They were offering up another guy, and they could only pick one person to support. And I was never their guy, unfortunately. So frustrated with that, I decided to throw away that opportunity, that dream, to then just understand. And John gave Ruiz a call and said, all right, when can you be here? And it was April 2nd. I forget. It's a Saturday before the Denver Broncos Seahawks Super Bowl.
Oh, God.
On 2014. So whatever date that was. But that's when, packed up my car, drove from DC down to Tampa, Florida, and it all began. And who he is, it's impossible for me to describe and understand. I use caricatures, and the ultimate representation for him I like is Ra's al Ghul from Batman Begins.
Mm-hmm.
And that Bruce Wayne going into Ra's al Ghul and just this League of Shadows and getting the ultimate training experience, that was the ultimate representation of what I had. So it was 4 months of we were up at 5 a.m. to lead. We had back-to-back sessions of athletes. So we lead back-to-back sessions. From there, or within the sessions, you were either an athlete for one or coach for one, just determining on how many, if we're uneven at the 5 a.m., I'm jumping into the 5 a.m. to just partner up and then work together and then coach the next class. So depending on that, from there, we would go to University of Tampa for swimming. So we would practice swimming or drown proofing and all sorts of mental toughness in a extremely stressful scenario. And then we would take a lunch break and come back, and it was all lecture. So whiteboard in there and going through just simple anatomy, movement, all this crazy things that he then it would all add together and evolve into this thing he refers to as the emotional quotient. So relating to athletes and then commanding their psychology of discomfort, leading their mental and emotional states in training, in competition, all this amazing stuff. So whiteboards, this is 4 months of lectures all over the place. And then in the afternoon, he would have his afternoon athletes. So it was, man, we were on for 12 hours. And, weekends I would fly away to teach a CrossFit football seminar to help pay the bills. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, man, it was an immersive experience. It was all in. And there I was working with professional fighters, minor league baseball players, Olympic swimmers, collegiate swimmers, collegiate soccer players, so all forms of and shapes, athletes, and then just his general pop, meaning that he had former collegiate athletes that were still in the Tampa area would come back and, bang weights, sprint, do all the fun stuff. So it was the ultimate scope of people, even youth. So some parents would bring youth kids that weren't even high school level, but we're still able to apply the same movement, training, speed, all this crazy stuff. And, that it really opened my eyes to that coaching aspect. It's not just the written program that you hand off to your athletes. It's not just cueing and providing directions. It's this all-encompassing, empowering opportunity that you have to truly take someone where they can't take themselves. And it is holding them to a high standard and expectation, but then not only holding it to them, you're empowering them to really rise to that occasion, even if it is just training. But then the whole thing is you want to make their competition, their moment, their challenge, their task, if they're military, individual, easy. And it was amazing. It was truly the defining experience that I, as a coach, and I aim to. And I signed this thing called a pipe pledge from him, and I took it very seriously. I'm trying to define it, but again, presence, the intelligence quotient. I'm drawing a blank on the second P, but then the fourth for pipe is the emotional quotient, and that is something you sign a pledge to represent all of these things to then hand off to your athletes or hold them to a standard. So I took it seriously back then, and then anytime I speak or go and coach, whether it's a strength and conditioning session or sports session, I currently coach lacrosse here in my hometown, but take it very seriously to try to bring to it, because I know that the potential that a coach has to empower, or vice versa. If I slip up and make a mistake like I did on my very first day, there are ultimate consequences for an athlete long term.
He touched on, and I'm drawing a blank as well, Tex. He touched on that in the last symposium. He had the pipe laid out, and that it humbled me. It showed that my shit does stink, and I don't know, I'm not all encompassing. And I'm sure that was a hour and a half session. I didn't get that immersive experience. And this, going from where you were at to RAF, it was kind of that dynamic, that transition between chasing the polo, chasing the name, going through the college strength and conditioning cycle into that private sector, being able to have that the huge impact that we're able to have on those guys. And so I took away from that I can always be improving. And he made you feel very small. And I liked that aspect. However, if you can take one thing from that, it's just the impact that you can have, that every single interaction, every single conversation, every single day, every single session, there's something that can be done. And that kind of gets us back to that pipe pledge.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting.
Yeah. And dude's got the power where he made you feel small. He also has the ability to then make an athlete feel big for their moment. Man, it was awesome. And I mean, I have plenty of hilarious stories and things that just went down and happened. Man, I just got too many run through my head to express, but probably the favorite, since you had Luke on recently, I went. I found the house on Craigslist to just rent a room in Tampa. I was going to be a very short period of time. I'm on signing a lease. I'm also broke at this point, but so found a house that was a half a mile from his gym location, and then it turned out this woman. I barely saw her. Like I described it, I'm up at 4 a.m. I'm back at maybe 8 p.m. and barely saw this woman. It was just very cordial. Hello and goodbye. Cooking up eggs in off hours in the morning, or baking steak, not baking steaks, but making steaks, late at night. But 22 days into me staying into this home, this woman, she actually, I didn't realize it, but was very sick. So she had some form of cirrhosis of the liver, and she ended up passing away 22 days into me staying with her. Yeah.
Oh shit.
And then there's some Tampa freaking white trash drama that went on. She was dating apparently a pizza boy, like pizza delivery man, Domino's, and then her ex-boyfriend was the sole heir, I guess, of her will. And then it had current boyfriend versus ex-boyfriend, who was like super afflicted dude, rhinestone jeans and all this stuff. And then a dude coming off a shift of Domino's. And I was in the middle of this immersive strength and conditioning apprenticeship. And at the end of it, like the afflicted dude changed the locks, and he told me straight up, like, how much are you paying a month, which was nothing for the room. Not nothing, but barely anything for the room. And he's like, all right, I got too much going on to deal with this, and honored the rest of the lease that I had. So I was able to rent an entire house for the cost of a single room for my whole time there. And then like Luke came out and stayed with me for a week. And the only other room for him to sleep in was the deceased. Yeah. So he's sleeping in this woman's bed, and we're full on week of the Ruiz experience, sun up, sun down. And man, yeah, Luke was all over him, like Filipino stick fighting and missing, sometimes catching Luke. And I got the shit kicked out of me anytime we were doing some practice fighting. Ref would miss and just take a freaking foot to the face on one of his kicks and shit. But I don't know. Just seeing Luke in there for 1 week and be like, man, fuck this. And I don't know how many months left, but it was great.
And I don't hold it to that standard of how immersed you were into it, but man, my experience with him is it Kadaya?
Kadaya Killers.
Yes. Kadaya Killers, and then he made us do the Frogger Shuttle. Holy shit. That was at the symposium, and that really dropped your ego pretty quick. As you said, you explained it. He will belittle you with zero external load. Anything. With anything.
Oh, and that's where I truly learned to coach, because people are like, hey, how much equipment do we have? Or I need this for my weight room. You don't need anything. You just show up and we're going to have a great fucking time. So it was truly, man, it was an amazing experience, and how he views movement and then coaches movement. I aim to aspire to, and then speak during my lectures or anything on Instagram. I'm trying to break down movement so the coaches can see it. And he's a fantastic teacher, and aim to aspire to that. But at the same time, if you're not seeing what I'm saying, then we got an issue.
Yeah.
And we're going to get into athlete communication here a little bit, but it's certainly how I communicate and talk to a coach is different than I would to an athlete.
Yeah.
When I'm putting out information on Instagram or social or speaking and presenting and teaching on the whiteboard or at a conference, I got coach speak on. I'm speaking to you as a coach, completely different than I would communicate and speak and empower an athlete. So that's another thing as well, is his ability, and I was able to observe it, right? Because I had the lectures, I had the whiteboard, I had that him berating me, and then, okay, get to see this unfold when he's communicating to these rock stars.
Yeah. I want you to kind of pull from both experiences, and we chatted a little bit about it, but your experiences with him and then your experiences at continued education, is if you want to put it that way. But you've cut your teeth, you've educated athletes to begin with, and then the entire goal of Power Athlete is to empower performance, but also to look at it from a bigger perspective, empower the coaches so they can empower the athletes. And so you've been a part of Brett Bartholomew's clinic, and which one was it specifically?
The apprenticeship.
Apprenticeship.
That's his 2-day in person. He's got a few courses online, but the specific one I attended, I've taken his online courses, but the specific one I attended was the apprenticeship.
Okay.
At Colby, when's this coming out?
It's going to be 2 weeks.
Okay. Well, right about now, but his next one, I believe, is in Phoenix, Arizona at the beginning of May.
Oh.
Great excuse to get out to Phoenix, say what's up to Xanis, and go to that apprenticeship.
Nice. So he has multiple of these, and he's caught a shit ton of backlash for going away from traditional S&C into what I would still consider S&C, but it's just on the communication side. Going through that, kind of explain, without obviously giving it away, but explain that experience, one, and then where did you find, because I don't know the specific exercises you guys went through, but I was very intrigued when you talked about it. What was your limiting factor? Because it's a very intense experience.
Yeah, and Brett pulls improv principles to then aim to educate and empower communication. That's like the one-liner on the course. So a lot of the practices and drills, rather than him just lecturing us about point 1, 2, 3, communication, cueing, directions, empowerment, buy-in, you're out there and you're doing similar exercises that you would see and experience on a Whose Line Is It Anyway? But like little improv class tricks, and you see where members of the class I attended were primarily physical therapists, coaches, and then some simple leaders in the community. And you would almost see people default to their language, their expertise, because you got nowhere to go. I mean, it's awkward. You're on the spot. So you would see people just fall to the level of their training rather than the person they're talking to. So if I was speaking to a police officer, I would default to, anatomical positions, blah, 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 like coach speak, rather than who I was talking to. So that was just one of the pieces I failed a lot, man. I'm an introvert. I hate this as much as I speak for a living. I still don't like to, but yeah, man. And he calls you out he allows drills to call you out for your mistakes, and then coaches you through, okay, here's tactics, here's things to aim to improve your communication. One of the biggest takeaways I got is for coaches that are stuck in a rut or stuck in the grind, maybe not the position they currently want. An example would be leading a part-time coach, or how we would refer to power athletes as a mercenary coach, meaning I'm teaching a few classes here, a few classes at this gym, or got some personal training clients on the side, and you're all over the place all day, and versus a solid coaching position, finding trick, and that can get very old quickly, but finding tricks to work on your communication, meaning that, all right, well, I'm going to aim to finish or begin all of my sentences with the letter P, or aim to drive this communication by only asking questions. So almost handcuffing yourself with a couple tricks, and he provides a whole list of these exercises to then just coach up yourself if you're stuck in that rut, to challenge yourself. Or if I'm the leader of a gym or manager, I could say to my staff, all right, we're going to do some team building and then do these certain drills that Brett put us through that would aim to identify the limitations, weaknesses, and almost gain some humility as a team, rather than, as we all know very well in the fitness industry, ego brings its ugly head all over the place. Like, bring down that ego guard amongst my team so we can practice some humility with some fun, silly banter games and things like that, to then work on truly communicating with one another, rather than just being, big man in the room that nobody can freaking talk to because my title.
Yeah. It's on the bucket list to go do one of those, because as much as I enjoy, I'm the opposite from an introvert, and I truly enjoy that, but I know I have some major limiting factors. And from somebody listening to Brett or somebody that's gone there, I can see people pick apart what I'm doing, and it's a very uncomfortable situation. But that's where you're learning. That's where you felt uncomfortable, where you were learning. And I was at your guys' last symposium, and Coach Ron McKeefrey had a very decent presentation that was very empowering. And I took from that, I tried to take one thing from everybody's presentation that I could implement now. And his was the why meetings to that. And this kind of correlates to that effective communication with the coach. And I've seen it change a complete culture. I've been implanted into a very successful NAI college football team. We've won our conference 5 years in a row. We are playing a playoff game in April 17th, and we're 10th in the nation. And we've had a good culture. However, as you explained, it was sport coach, who was also the defensive coordinator, who was also the assistant track coach, and a professor, was now our strength and conditioning coach.
NAIA.
Yes.
Yeah.
Something has to take the ass end of his time, and it was our strength and conditioning. And so we had no culture within that weight room. And knowing the guys being charismatic and upbeat, but very stern, I was able to get what I wanted out of them, but it was something still missing. And I came back from the symposium. I had plenty of time sitting at a shitty hotel in Austin by myself, ordering Grubhub. And I'm sitting there writing this shit down, and I was like, I just have to implement this. So I wrote up my own why meeting page. 3 questions, very simple. What would you be doing if there was no restrictions? If you had a dream, what would you be doing right now? Second one, what's the hardest thing you've ever gone through in your life? Emotional, relationship, whatever. And then who's the most influential person in your life? Me doing that during fall camp, 100 athletes, completely dropped walls, completely catapulted buy-in, allowed those kids to know me a little bit and me know them. And I was trying to find that balance between this, you need to be a bald, big beard, and just a dickhead all the time, or finding that emotional side, directing that elephant, okay? And so that completely changed everything. And that is such one small little thing with other factors that completely flipped it on its head. And I couldn't have picked a better thing to implement instantly that changed everything. And that's the aspect I'm trying to get at, is we get caught up in the X's and O's. We get caught up in all the other thing when Brett has been trying to press this for a long while now, and hopefully he's starting to obviously get some traction.
Yeah, hopefully. I'm rooting for him, and it's tough. And you mentioned the backlash that he gets, and that's extremely unfortunate, but representative of the unwillingness of majority of this field. And eventually those guys will die out or get fired out, and then this new wave of conscious coach, to use Brett's book title, will begin to take over.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm excited for. And those same coaches that are willing to read through his archetypes that he presents there or attend his, are the same coaches that we have going through the methodology and looking through the lens of athleticism versus just old textbook or their former coach that they were interning under, and having that one perspective in view be their way for the rest of their career. No. Let's look at all these different lenses and see what we can glean and take away from whomever we're learning from. And guess what? Everyone that you interact with or having working under you still has something that you can learn from.
Yep. And I believe, and so going through this and giving my listeners and the people that will listen to this something tangible to take away. This lies with under that umbrella of communication, but it's a little bit more simplified. And I believe you guys did you guys have Miss Wolf, Gabriella Wolf, on your podcast?
No, I aimed to.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, she declined our request. But
Ooh.
Yeah.
The hell?
Yeah, I'm not sure, but we did read her book, and friend that turned me on to her research and tools was Rachel Larson, who then we were able to parlay into Nick Winkelman, who's an amazing communicator, amazing coach. And those two coaches, Rachel and Nick, really helped to define and draw fences around how I cued and communicated versus just some simple approaches that we talked about at the seminar way back when. They truly directed me to the research to then define how we were speaking to athletes and then how we empower coaches to speak and communicate to athletes.
Yeah. What were some of the things that, for people that don't know the methodology, and the methodology separate of the Block 1 experience, just diving into the meat and potatoes, going through Gabrielle's research, I mean, she did a very good job along with Larson and Winkelman, like you said, to put very defined terms and defined parameters around how we communicate. And it's very interesting. I mean, picking up from the methodology, I picked up the explanation, demonstration, imitation, repetition, going through that life cycle of cueing, you could say, and demonstration. What were some of the things that you guys took from that were able to, one, skew or for the positive, your perspective and how you talk, and how that was implemented into the methodology?
So we do have some work to then update that based off what we've been leading to, and that's the beauty of podcasting in itself. As you know very well, you're meeting people that you're able to change and adjust and evolve your thinking and thought process. So within the methodology, we see the iteration of our new communication style and approach through our trainer's course, and which personal training and working with, I would say, behavior change clients, a hell of a lot harder than it is athletes. So your communication must be more dialed in, because the smallest miscommunication or misstep and false belief that they have about themselves has cascading effects on their benefits, their experience, their gains that they're making with you. The communication infinitely more important there. And how Winkelman specifically has helped us is our shape. So how I'm communicating movement, I would define it, right? This is how a power athlete, we define movement as primal movement. So foundational movement patterns and transitional movement patterns. Foundational movement patterns are simple: squat, step, lunge, vertical push, vertical pull, horizontal push, horizontal pull. So 7 foundational movements. That's where we begin our education for athletes. It's the meat and potatoes of our strength and conditioning, right? Squat, step, lunge, deadlift, power clean, all this good stuff that we can overload safely and then drive some specific adaptations for athletes. Our transitional movements, this is where we begin to practice athleticism within the weight room. Transitional as in throwing, running, jumping, ing for our podcast fans, where I'm moving through space or combining primal movement patterns, a squat to a step up or a squat to a lunge, different primal complexes, or simple as the single arm overhead walking lunge. That would be a combination of a vertical press and then a lunge, walking lunge. So that's how we define movement. Then we get into model. This would be if I'm on my Train Heroic app, I'm checking out the video. That's somebody modeling a perfect representation, especially if it's my demo versus Luke's, buddy. Then that would be a model of a perfect representation for that movement. If I'm a sport coach, I'm looking at freaking, I don't know, it's baseball season. So let's just call out Alex Bregman for his amazing ability at the plate. So I, as a coach, baseball coach, would model Alex Bregman's swing, his perfect swing, go Astros. And then I would begin to shape my athletes. I have my perfect model. I'm going to watch my athletes swing or squat or lunge or do anything. And then shaping would be what I'm saying, what I'm communicating, aim to hone in their movement to get it as perfect and close to the model as possible. And this is where Nick's comes into play for how we are educating athletes into getting them as close to that model as we can, whatever that movement may be. So it's as one rule of one. I'm only going to give them one thing to focus on and think about versus all the things that may be wrong, right? And there's an infinite amount of corrections that could be applied, especially if we're talking about a middle schooler. Then I'm still giving them one thing to focus on and not get paralysis by analysis and overthinking it, and me be a selfish coach who's just flexing hard on this athlete that doesn't care. They just want to get better. So his rule of one, that was really impactful in that respect. And then the final piece of movement would be reinforced. So that this is where I get to come in and, not be afraid to tell them they did a good job. But I'm not going to reinforce poor movement. I'm not going to be the cheerleader coach who says, good job, good effort, but your movement was dog shit. I need to only reinforce good movement. I take that back on the effort. I'll reinforce effort, attitude, good representations of a good teammate, but I won't say good job and things for a poorly executed action. Then I reinforce, shit movement. In the world of performance, unacceptable. In the world of fitness, stick to the reinforcing the good things that they have. Effort, attitude, smiling, how they speak and communicate to themselves, did they put their head down or did they, infinite things. You think behavior for reinforced when we're dealing with fitness, and then movement or teamwork if we're talking to performance-based athletes.
Yeah.
But those four simple things, but man, that's shape. That is coaching.
I seen that when we were coached by you guys, Symposium and Block 1. Seen that through a lot of the different coaches, even Xanis when we're going through all the foot stuff. And that rule of one has simplified what I do a ton. And I could always do a better job with it, but I'm always trying to just package this up and deliver one very precise and concise cue for these people. And we've seen that with you guys coaching us. And then we can kind of break that down into a little bit more molecular level for these coaches to take away. And the way you guys break down, we have our tactical cueing, but we also have external and internal cueing. I do have some of the research pulled up here, And very broadly, the looking at the results page, if you say, I'll give you a little bit of a summary, but very basically, when we're looking at an athlete and we turn their internal focus into inside and we turn them inside, first off, everything we do as an athlete is a representation of our reaction to an external force of some sort. And so turning their focus inwards actually can turn off a lot of our automated thoughts, our automated movements. And they showed that in the research, but then you look at the external side, and it's shown that you can produce more force. You have better balance. You have better learning of movement. And so kind of go over a little bit of your guys' breakdown of how this research has led you through a big thing that a lot of people, maybe my listeners, don't know, how you guys define tactical cueing or internal and external.
All right, tactical. This is where I use my hands or my feet or my body, so I would get in the way. If I don't want an athlete's knees to drive out, for example, I'm going to get in the way. So I'm going to get right up on them foot to foot and make sure that they hit a roadblock, which would be me. They're not moving me. I don't care how big they are. That they would then feel that, oh, okay, that is a wall. I'm not going to hit that brick wall. Or if I'm doing some shoulder, if I would like them to maintain a neutral shoulder position and not shrug up during stress, I would go up to their shoulders and just give them a little tickle. If I'm seeing that elevation, that shrug up, a tactical feel, proprioceptive touch from the coach, that would be a representation of a tactical cue. Getting in the way, right? Or just bringing some attention to a poor positioning rather than me just saying, shoulders down. They may not know or feel that their shoulders are down, or really stiff hands. We got a new video guy, and he was working out with us this morning and doing some Bulgarian split squats, unweighted, but his hands were just freaking stiff as a board. So what do? Walk up to him, shake his hands and tell him, hey, relax, man, relax. Next set, same thing. All right, now I got to step my coaching up. I got to think Chubbs Peterson, the greatest fictional coach of all time. I got to just ease the tension, baby. So what do? I just grab his hand, I hold his hand, and just start swinging it back and forth. And he's like, what the fuck are you doing? No, yeah, relax, man, relax. So trying to make it awkward using tactical cues, just say, hey, man, be cool and relax. That'd be an example. I'm using my body, my hands, my feet to then coach. External cueing, I'll go with internal cueing first, because the research, and this is the fun arguments we get to have with Rachel, in that the research may say it's negative for performance, but my argument would be, what are you training for? Are we now aiming to put on mass? If I'm a Jack Street athlete, I don't have a sport, a reactive, explosive responsibility, I just want to look good, awesome. Internal cueing is then the way to go. So I want you to internalize. And bodybuilders have mastered the art of internal focus. So squeezing. So you're speaking about thinking inside that muscle. That would be a representation of an internal cue, where I give you a specific direction on a bodybuilding movement. Say it's going to be a hex press, where I'm taking two dumbbells and I'm mashing them together, and then I want to maintain force as I'm bench pressing the hex, those two dumbbells pressing together, and I just want to think about squeezing my pecs until they pop. Awesome. Beautiful. I'm going to fight. It's going to burn. It's going to suck. But guess what? I'm focusing on building muscle, not necessarily performance there. Then I have my external cueing, and this is big on Nick Winkelman's book, The Language of Movement. Shout out to Nick. Go ahead and make that a Christmas gift for yourself. And it's single action, single words: push, dive, drive. They're going to represent movement through space. but that's going to have an external cue. Push the ground away is too long. That's too much of a conversation. As much as I would love that direction as a coach to apply that, I would simply say push and almost use my hands to the direction that I want them to move through space. Or if I'm giving them a visual of a dive, I'm taking an imaginary hammer in my hand and I'm bringing it towards the ground. Dive, dive, drive, drive. So these single actions, single words, but I, as a coach, am using my body to represent and emphasize the power in which to move these. So excellent for performance-based athletes, your football guys. But then your coaching staff, who's looking a little weak or loose in the sleeves, hey, bring in the internal cueing and get them going there for them.
Yep.
But when they're on the practice field, they better be using external cues for their guys for how they want them to execute the routes or the steps or the actions for the lineman.
Yep, and that's the art of coaching, is finding that balance. I mean, we should.
I got Colby. I'm going to throw one more, and this is what I couldn't necessarily use at the CrossFit football, the CrossFit SSA seminars, because the sport of fitness didn't necessarily apply. But I was able to use this with the crew teams, the lacrosse teams that I was coaching. And then Luke and I kicked around a term for this. I can't recall it at the moment. Sport-specific cueing.
Okay.
Basically, we asked, hey, what sports do you play? Basketball? Awesome. Show me how you set up in your defensive position. And then they would show us their defensive position, and then we say, all right, well, this is going to be our squat stance, right? Universal athletic position. Or show me how you set up for your offensive line set. Awesome. Well, we're going to make this small adjustment, and then this is going to be our squat stance. So we're using their sport. All right, for a squat, I need you to push back like you're trying to box out. That's how you're going to initiate your squat. So we're using their sport to guide their execution of movement in the weight room, which effectively I need to go observe practice. I need to see how the sport coach is communicating, and I need to bring their language into the weight room. Yeah. That takes a good relationship with the sport coach, and then it is infinitely beneficial for the athlete because they're getting the same on-field, off-field direction, language, communication, and then that makes them stronger in the weight room, better movers in the weight room, which infinitely the best gift that I want to give a sport coach is a coordinated athlete. That's going to make me look real good. Numbers are one thing, but coach able kids, boom, that's going to get me hired.
Yeah. You're able to bridge that gap through the verbiage and communication on both sides. I found that playing for the coach that was my head coach, and now I'm coaching with that staff. I can see what their needs are. I know what they want. Going to the practices or something that's going to the games or practices are not something that are on your paycheck. And I find that some of that is some of the most important things that I've done. One, connecting to that, we get back to Coach McKeefery, connecting back to that emotional side of the athlete, being able to show them that you care, show them that you're going to be there for those big things, but being able to bridge that gap fairly well. And and you'll have to try to ask Luke and tell me what you guys come up with that name, if it was sports-specific cueing. But I find that very interesting, and that bridges really well into the toes forward mentality, because you're taking how they move on the field, how they move elsewhere, and then putting it into movement within the weight room. And so I know the origin story decently from where the toes forward came from, but this has almost became a way of life, to be honest. Like, we're always forward moving, we're always going, we're always doing what we need to do. And so kind of bless our listeners with the origin story of where this came to be.
All right, I'll take you back. As mentioned, I attended the 5th ever CrossFit football seminar with John, and the lights went off. There was times in my playing career in which I was overpowered, outrun, and just straight up beat on the field, despite of benching 315, squatting 400 plus. And I had a moment in a game Just a guy backed me down and just basically slam dunk lacrosse on me. The goalie grabs my face mask and he screams, "I've seen you bench 300 pounds. Get this guy off of me!" And my goalie pushes me like out of his face, and it was disheartening. I couldn't figure out how my training within the weight room wasn't transferring to the field. I shouldn't have been in that position, but I was overpowered. So always had this seed in my mind of what the hell. And then I had all conference kids on my team that couldn't even bench press 185 pounds or could rip 100 miles an hour. Never made sense to me. Go to CrossFit Football Seminar. We set up, and John introduces a term called posture and position. The representation, the reason we lift weights is to maintain, as athletes, is to maintain posture and position. John's reference was offensive lineman. We're set up in a toes forward, knees over arches in steps in a staggered stance. His job as a tackle is to then maintain the pocket. So he's stepping back, toes forward. And if he loses his position on the field, meaning if he's playing on the left tackle side, his left foot and hip opens up. So he goes toes out and then rotates 45, 90 degrees towards the defensive end. He gives up the depth. He gives up the edge. He lost his position, which then the defensive lineman can get the quarterback much easier. He lost his position on the field. He lost his job. We then can add barbell to challenge these specific positions from the field that we need to maintain. And it's safe for us to overload and see exactly where the body is moving or compensating or failing at the maximal amount of stress that we can safely add in the weight room. My mind exploded at this point because I played defense, and essentially playing defense as lacrosse is very similar to offensive line, meaning that the goal is 6x6. If I'm straight on, Colby, I'm playing against you. I'm playing defense, 6x6 boxes to my back with a little goalie inside, and then I try to push you to your left, to my right. Then that 6x6 window is closing. I'm in a good position. You're fighting to get in my inside, but I'm making that window close. But then you put on some awesome, move on me. You roll inside. All of a sudden, that 6x6 window of opportunity expands for you. You gained position. I lost position, and that was freaking it for me. The weight room is our opportunity to just overload our athletes and find out exactly where those screws are loose for the positions in which they will fail on the field. So that toes forward position, this is how we're catching rebounds. It's how we're standing people up on the offensive line. It is very representative of a force reducing position. It is not optimal for vertical jumps. If we're testing for the combine, it's not optimal for being very explosive off the ball, but it's optimal for maintaining this position and reducing the forces, whether they're external, meaning like you running at me, or this internal force and torque that would happen within the body. And the weight room is our chance to then say we're going to catch our power cleans, toes forward, representative of that external force crashing down on our body. We're able to maintain toes forward, knees over arches, and steps. Using all these tools within the weight room that, okay, they may not win us a fitness competition or an Olympic weightlifting competition or a powerlifting competition, because those are specific sports. Those are the means to an end. We're using all these training tools for a different means, a different end, and to see where our athletes are going to fail. Then me as a strength coach, see where they're failing under weight, and then I'm building out my accessory program to help solidify those based off overloading our foundational movement patterns. And I have a complete strength and conditioning program that then I can take this athlete who we identified weakness, we built the program, we gave them the opportunity, we strengthened them up, and we hand them to the sport coach. Not to be a number on the squat rack or a number on our leaderboard that they step on the field and get their ass kicked, What the hell? He can bench 315. He can squat 400 pounds, but he's getting his ass kicked on the line. No. So that is that toes forward. One of the arguments to say, oh, our hips. Well, I'll tell you this: there are best practices within sports, basketball, football, lacrosse. We are aiming to empower the athletes to overload toes forward position. I'm not talking about depth to a full ass to grass squat. I know the best practice that an offensive lineman would teach. When I was at University of Texas, I was in charge of the offensive lineman for the strength and conditioning to run Mad Dog's program. Okay, so now we talk about we're not worried about depth here. We're worried about can these boys squat, step, and lunge and overload and go full speed. Awesome. So it's representing the position, best practice that they need for their sport. It's not too depth to win a competition. And man, it's overloading and preparing them for then to survive their sports practice, to then step up to their one moment, their one opportunity, which is to play when the clock is ticking. Not long-term health. That's another thing, man. This is for performance. Mm-hmm. I could argue toes forward for long-term health, and here's why. Mm-hmm. Toes forward, we're going to find a limitation within your movement. I'm still going to overload safely. We're going to squat as low as you're able to maintain. Toes forward position, solid knee position, and then we're going to identify, all right, where's my catch? I can't get below parallel because ankles. I can't get below parallel because flat feet. I can't get below parallel because of hamstring issues or jammed up something. All right, well, guess what? We're going to overload to the point we're able to maintain good posture position, and I'm using load, I'm using stress, I'm using weight to then attack that limitation. So movement becomes our solution. We're having them identify the limiting factors, and we're giving them a corrective exercise with movement, not therapy actions or excuses not to do something. We're overloading it and having them move through their full range of motion to build stability within that range. Yep. So, I mean, there's plenty out there, man, that people, bitch and moan, but at the same time, the majority of our population we're working with are freaking high motor or high horsepower athletes that need to be prepared for the forces on the field, which are greater than we could ever create in a weight room. Yeah. So if I'm seeing these small tweaks, changes, limitations, loose screws at the maximum amount of load that I could put on them, I know it's going to happen when they get tired in the third quarter and there's another 300-pound person crashing down on them.
It's as much as it seems like a make or break, a black or white. You guys talk about it once you get within the block one or the methodology. It is a general statement for everything we do because it's the optimal position to deload or deaccelerate weight, to absorb that weight. And that brings up a good point of holding a posture and position. And for people that don't know what he's kind of talking about, being able to hold posture and position with a barbell, hold a posture and position with another 300-pound lineman, being able to stay in an optimal posture and position so that you're in the best position, just like you said with that 6x6 box. That's very interesting. I've never dove into lacrosse at all. And being able to hold that longer than the other individual, you win. Okay? So if we can accelerate, decelerate, and reaccelerate weight quicker in a good posture and position, you're going to win that one-on-one every single time. And so that helps people realize like our end goal is to be the best athlete. This is a means to get there. And you guys had a go ahead.
No, I got one more note to add on that. So then this is part of the reason that I wanted to expand on the phrase in the education. Again, the beauty of teaching and coaching, I love these quips, these one-liners, and one of the ones I like the most is teach movement, not movement. If anyone's coming at me with a squat argument and hips and all that, they are focusing on teaching movement. They view the squat as the squat. They view the lunge as a lunge, the step as a step, and then an infinite number of different movements that they can then teach their athletes or give to their clients. Our objective, the filter we apply movement and education and strength and conditioning from, is athleticism. I said that earlier. So the aim with the toes forward squat is, how am I educating our lunges? We're certainly going to lunge forward through space with our toes forward. We're going to perform our step up onto the box, toes forward. We're going to teach our sprinting straight ahead, toes forward. When we change direction, I'm going to plant my foot hard, drive it into the ground, toes forward, knee over arches in step. So everything in which we do, we need to teach and educate toes forward, deadlifting especially. So we're aiming to have all these different components and pieces of the movements that we teach connect to movement as a whole. Teach movement, not movements. With the objective, I want as much as the overload that I have from my bilateral squat to carry then over to my unilateral lunge, to my step up, which is moving along a different axes of rotation for my hips, which then puts us in a position to translate to our jumps. Empowering our jumps, our explosivity, then puts us in a position to empower our sprints and our speed. Identifying a limitation in the lunge, toes forward, there is a disconnect then for our sprints. If there's a limitation in the lunge, this is why it's a foundational movement, I have the opportunity to focus on it, to load it up, to correct, and to fix, to then carry up chain to our transitional movements, running, jumping, throwing, playing, sport. And then what so many people get lost in that squat. But they're not seeing this big picture of athleticism.
Yeah.
And look at this is where research gets interesting. Bilateral deficit, right?
Yeah.
We're supposed to be stronger unilaterally. Like I can step forward within my lunge or perform a Bulgarian split squat. Oh yeah, love Boyle. Highly support his coaching, his attitude in general, and just how he speaks to people, and just being Boston straight up. Love it. But then if we look at this is very interesting thought. This is not, this is my personal views, opinions, not that of Power Athlete, but just thinking what happened to the bilateral deficit. The bilateral sport of fitness, interestingly, has almost eliminated it, right? All the deadlifting, the x-axis of rotation, the sagittal plane movements of wall balls, full squat cleans, right? That joke, all the squats there, man. And then they try to step into a lunge or perform a step up or Bulgarian split squat, losing that bilateral deficit. It's interesting. You're supposed to, according to the research, right, be stronger with single leg right, single leg left, and then put it together and be weaker. What? That would be almost laughable if we tested some of these sport of fitness athletes.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Try it out.
Yeah.
Test it out. See what happens. Don't just assume anything.
I had a coming to Jesus moment with a sport coach about teaching movement, not movements. And this was prior to my Block 1 experience, just kind of diving into Power Athlete. And she asked, and it's similar to this, what was it? Squat scholar, whatever you guys got into with the sprinting toes forward. And so she talked about, Coach, and she left a comment for everybody to see. She said, Coach, why are you still vertically pressing athletes with many coaches going away from that due to the risk reward? And my rebuttal was very long, but it boiled down to, I'm not teaching them a vertical push. I'm teaching them the bridge between force production into all their other stuff, into all their athletic movement. And so she sat down and talked with me, and she said it made sense that if we shy away from movements, we're not completely getting the entire picture of what human movement is or athletic movement. And so in one token, you don't want to put yourself in this box, but also just because a small population of people, 1 to 10%, this is not a specific number, are not physically fit to vertically press, there's no bad movement. I'm not going to kibosh and throw away a movements so that some people cannot do that. And so she came to the realization, and I gave her some education to look at, but there's no such thing as bad movement. I've heard you say that before. And there's no such thing as bad movements. And so we can't bastardize these movements because of a very small amount of population.
Oh, and that's real at the collegiate level.
Oh,
sport coach, dude, especially with the strict pull-up. Pull-up, man. Infinite benefits. Quoting John Wellborn, weighted pull-ups will cure world hunger.
Yeah.
That's a John quote. But then someone crosses their ankles when they're doing strict pull-ups, and then fatigue sets in, or they're just, their mind wanders off to something else, and they drop down from that strict pull-up with their ankles crossed, roll that ankle, and then they got to go tell the sport coach what happened, or tell the trainer what happened. Oh, I was doing pull-ups. What?
Yeah.
Then pull-ups get ripped from the program because that individual twisted his ankle, just, had a brain fart for one moment. But then the strict pull-up is stripped from that sport coach's program, meaning every other strength coach you'll ever work with is not allowed to do strict pull-ups, which then negatively affects your ability to back squat because you now can't back squat as much, and this negative reverberation of performance based off stripping one tool from the coach's toolkit. And I mean, the same is for Olympic weightlifting, same is for the vertical press. And you just hear horror stories of strength coaches going into programs, getting handed a no-fly zone from the sport coach, and it's all these lifts. It's then on the strength coach, however, and I've met a lot of very creative, right, who instead of saying, or a sport coach saying, hey, no power cleans. We're not doing Olympic weightlifting. These are basketball guys. Okay, coach, no problem. Oh, what do we got today? Oh, we're just doing some jumps with weight, the vertical pull. Okay, cool. Sounds great. Oh, yeah, I like that. And it's redefining these things and finding creative ways or explaining it in the form of movement. Hey, we're working on this foundational or transitional movement, and the sport coach is like, oh, yeah, cool. It sounds interesting. Just no bench pressing or whatever. Yeah. So
I found
it's all about how you phrase it.
Yep. I also had another thing with bench press. Ex-military coach. He very good sport coach. I mean, he could be at any Division I being very successful. But military background and very hoorah. And so he came and talked. We were benching once a week. That's how the program called, and obviously accessory movements that went along with that. He said, he framed it in a question saying, the athletes are worried that they're not benching enough. And so I rephrased that in my mind. I said, well, you're worried that we're not benching enough. And so one, rephrasing what you're doing, okay, we're going to work on a horizontal push or a foundational movement, but also looking at giving them the why behind that, giving them the why that, hey, you're giving me this list of no-goes, and then here is your goal. This is what you want out of your team. This is my toolkit to get there. So you can actually reframe their state of mind to some extent. And I've been able to have success with that, and I've also failed. And so being able to look at their goal, take their perspective against them, and say, hey, we want to be faster. Okay. This is one means to get there. Can we do this? And it gets us back down to effective communication with those sport coaches. I've had a very good situation where it's not, I wouldn't call it hands off, but it's, we trust you. You get us to where we want to be, and you will get a check at the end of the month. Like that's that mentality that I found.
Oh, I have plenty of trip ups, F ups in my career. I lost the Georgetown women's lacrosse team, and I had my shot to take over their team, and they win the Big East on the reg. So I could have had my rings. It could have been, part of their success, but a failure in communication. The first day I took over responsibilities for the team is the first day that I lost them, and that they would finish their runs, conditioning sessions. This was off season. They would finish their run sessions with, I forget the name at this point in time, but it was basically a gasser. So imagine running 4 widths of the field, 1, 2, 3, 4, like 106 yards total. And the girls would, like, to try to make the times, they would just free Superman dive across this line and to try to make the times. But then you had girls that were not making the time and then doing this Superman dive, and they already missed the mark and failed in my mind, in my opinion there. And I was just like, this is stupid. So then, had my words about it. And then we also, within that session, we're doing dead bugs. We were doing wall drill, a lot of the cool stuff that picked up from the football seminar. In my mind, like, we're going to do performance-based training. And following that section, they were sore. They were sore. In their mind, sore meant
bad.
They were hurt. No, they were hurt. So they had not experienced soreness, like in hamstrings, calves, and they viewed that as a negative. I viewed it as a positive. Hey, you worked hard, you earned it, but I didn't communicate that. So the conversation with the sport coach came down to the weight room the next day. Mike Hill, God bless them, had supported me, but at the same time, they wanted me to work more with them on what they were doing. And I failed to communicate that soreness is a good thing. You work very hard. You earn that. This is a representation of your hard work. Failed to communicate that ahead of time, and then lost the opportunity to coach that group. And then that season, so I'm still coaching with the staff, but that season, 3 torn ACLs. So in my mind, I lost the opportunity to work with them, and no doubt we would have done a lot of posterior chain dominant actions. I didn't understand the ACL injury mechanisms at that point in time, but I was confident we would have done more posterior chain stuff. And that's when I began my essential deep dive into understanding that injury mechanism, because I took, again, responsibility for injuring these girls because I of poor communication at that. And now we got ACL course and have done speaking engagements for NSCA on ACL injury prevention. I know it's a terrible way to describe this. It's more injury risk reduction.
Yeah.
But and I look at those girls, the sacrifice to an understanding that hopefully has empowered and prevented some injuries down the line.
Yes. The gift of injury, hopefully. I mean, I've had that personally. Definitely coming back from something much more emotionally and cognitively aware of what's going on in your body. And it's a pretty decent segue there you got, Tex, into kind of, I was looking up just very basic, linear, I guess you could say, but very basic research. And it was from 1988 all the way to 2004. And very basically what it showed is the extent and the quantity of injuries that happened in the NCAA at all different sports. And it looked at, there was over I mean, so there's an injury reported, and then there's exposure to injury is how they did it. And there was over 182,000, and then there was over 1 million that were exposed. And so out of those, over 50%, it was right at like 51% of all those injuries were lower extremity, looking at the ankle, the knee. And the reason I bring that up is power athlete, the industry as a whole has gone to a foot health more aware company or industry, and we're looking more at the feet, and Cal Dietz has been a very big proponent of that. Power Athlete has, Matt Zanis being one of the foremost experts in that. And so how has Power Athlete, looking at this is that injury prevention or reduction model, how have you guys incorporated the use of footwork and things that can help the athlete down the road? Because me, and I can tell this after you say this, I've had some run-ins again with sport coaches about foot health. And so how has Power Athlete empowered others through the footwork they've been doing?
Well, key is awareness, and we have very hard-charging athletes following the Train Heroic programs. We're been through our seminars, our clinics, and they're always looking to improve their performance. Very performance-minded community and culture through Power Athlete. Limitation, we're always looking for that one piece and adjustment, where some are looking through it through a supplementation or a brace or a belt or something that can be patched on. We have created an understanding and culture of movement. So, all right, where do we, and thankfully through the help of Matt Zanis, communicate that is through that foot. All right, well, it's the smallest adjustments that we can make to have the biggest impact upstream. And many athletes, it takes some time to reach that point. They stall out on their big lifts, or they themselves face a tweak, an injury, that then okay, I have nothing left but to accept, all right, maybe there's something to this foot stuff. And Matt does a great job. He breaks it down. He's also got lower back guides that athletes can apply. A lot of the lower back issues going around in the weightlifting community. So rather than just ignoring it or grunting through it, we are forcing people to look at their limiting factor and then created a culture in which the community is willing to fix and correct to then empower their performance long term.
Yep.
Because let's see, John started putting workouts in March 2009. People have been following Power Athlete programs since then. We're looking at 12 years, going on 12 years. Actually, it's April, right? 12 years of people following this tried and true program. They are completely different human beings than they were 12 years ago. But they still trust in the approach, the movement. Their goals have changed. They've moved from a CrossFit style, CrossFit football, heavy, hard, fast, into a field strong athletic base, into a Jack Street hypertrophy, and now with family, life, and kids, they're grindstone athletes that only have 3 hours a week to dedicate to movement and training. They need to make sure that 3 hours matters. How we do that? Overload, but still identifying limitations and then exposing them to make sure what they do is more impactful and powerful. So it's the evolution of the athlete, the life cycle of an athlete. Eventually, you're going to get to this point, no matter who you are out there, where you got to start focusing on the shoulders, focusing on the hands, Kadaya killers you referenced, focusing on the lower back, the hips, the feet, of where you are feeling it. And we're just aiming to get ahead and push back that timeline for you as a hard-charging, awesome athlete as much as we can. Thankfully, through the assistance of Matt and then the podcast of empowering us to connect with awesome dudes like Cal Dietz and then Dr. Emily Splitchell.
Yep.
She's a good one. Episode 377, Power Athlete Radio. You've had her on, dude. I did. She's awesome.
Yeah. She's originally from Dickinson, man, where I'm living. So small world.
I can tell her accent, dude.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And I've had my run-in and gathering material from many different sources, Power Athlete being one, Cal Dietz being the other, Emily as well, and this whole network of how we can make the foot part of performance. And one small thing we implemented, and you mentioned putting a belt on or putting something on as a Band-Aid. And we were having some foot issues. We screen all of the athletes, so we have some force plates, and we screen all the athletes, go through high-speed cameras, go through all the good jazz there. And we looked, and a huge limiting factor for all these guys is their dorsiflexion is very limited. They're very tight. And so I proposed, and I said, like, we got to get these guys, one, out of shoes for a little bit, two, in some type of flat shoe, enter Vans or whatever works for that person. And we had a coach who'd coached there for over 42 years and very hard charging, very military-esque person. And then we have this transition into these younger coaches, and me being one of them and some other ones too. And I brought the ideas when we're in the weight room, when we're not doing our sprinting on the treadmills, we have some Athletic Republic treadmills. When we're doing weight room stuff, these kids need to bring in some flat shoes, bring in some, go barefoot when they squat. We can throw them on whenever we're doing anything else. And I had the hardest pushback out of anything that I've ever tried to implement. The hardest pushback with doing that in this implementation of just wearing a pair of flat shoes or Vans. And so we've been able to overcome that and connect to the coach that this is helping. And I prefaced it with, I'm not going to just do something just because I fucking want to. I'm doing it because there's an end goal in mind. There's something that's going to assist these guys in being better athletes. And it has helped a ton. And we've looked back and done more screening, and things are improving over a good long period of time. And so I've had that pushback where they're not in the fitness industry, and we have to know that. They are in the X's and O's of football. They're in the X's and O's of basketball. That's their thing. And so packaging it down, bringing us back to communication, saying we are doing this for this reason and it can help with this. It's been a game changer. And so we've been able to kind of establish that culture of having some Vans in the weight room, moving the dirt, and battling bullshit, man. It's been cool.
What was their pushback? Safety? Like, that's the only one I can think of.
That's exactly so the biggest pushback, I didn't explain it well, that the coach that had been there for 42 years, very stern, very strict. You need to wear this. You need to talk like this. You need to do these things. And so the younger coaches who played under him, who I played under this coach, Coach Hofflin, pushed back and said, Coach Hofflin would never allow Vans in the weight room. You can't move in Vans. You can't change direction in Vans. And I would obviously beg to differ. But they see this as this culture of a skate shoe or whatever it is. And I told him, I said, it doesn't have to be fucking Vans. It could be barefoot. It could be whatever. And so what we've done now is we've identified the limiting factors of those athletes. And when you are squatting, you are going to be in socks, but you're only in socks on the platform. You throw your shoes back on and you go do what you're doing. So that's kind of how we've implemented it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got Vans banned from University of Texas football weight room. Similar experience.
Really?
Fucking Benny Wiley didn't. Yeah, Benny Wiley, who's at Oklahoma right now, just looks down at my shoes and he's like, man, dude, boys are going to rip you. And his excuse was that I would just get made fun of by the players, which I don't care. Awesome. Yeah. Great. We can develop rapport. If they make fun of me, I'm going to give it right back, and I'll accelerate our connection. But yeah, made me take them off. And then I had to borrow shoes that day. Like, he gave me these bright yellow Nikes, and guess what? The dudes were ripping on me for the stupidest, ugliest clown shoes that I've ever worn. And then Benny's bigger than me, so these shoes were even like legit clown shoes bigger. Until I was able to get some like the Texas like burnt orange Nikes.
Yeah.
Here's the other thing with Vans or any flat shoes. Until Nike, like, I don't know if Nike makes one or not. I'm not a Nike person, but they have contracts with these shoe companies, and kids have to wear said shoes at D1 at least. So I don't know if the big Adidas, I don't know if Reebok's in it, but any of those big shows like Nike make that flat sole until then, because I mean the athletes have to wear it.
Yeah.
And there's a representative from these big companies that float around the D1s to make sure everyone is in line, which is very interesting. But
yeah, we're sponsored by Nike as well, but that's more like our travel gear, our uniforms, all that. The weight room, like you said, at a D1, that's what you wear. We have the flexibility to not do that. And I bring it back to something that you said, Tex, was empowerment and education. That's all it came down to. It was a very stern no in the beginning, and then bringing the why into it. That as a coach, is somebody that is very passionate about this. I'm not just going to do some bullshit just because I like Vans. I'm doing it for an end goal. And we've been able to track injuries, and and obviously it's multifactorial. There's more stuff going into this, but we've been able to cut down significantly because, as I said, I'm not a assistant coach, professor, track coach, then a strength coach. I'm just a strength coach. So it was a hard no, and we were able to kind of back around and get to where we needed to be, man.
And athletes don't even know how far that's going to take them.
Yep, exactly.
That's the beauty of risk reduction. Yes. Nobody knows.
Exactly. We're going to wrap this up, but I want to, first off, I want to see kind of what Power Athlete's up to, my friend. What's some big things you guys got around the corner? We're having our Block 1 meeting tomorrow, but what's going on in Power Athlete Ranch?
A lot of change, a lot of growth. The podcast is starting to really take off in not only the guests we're getting on, but also the production value. I mentioned the video, gentlemen. So expect to see a lot more quality of video, not just the information, be just face melting awesomeness that you experience week to week. So expanding our reach within that, but still continuing to dial in and be what Power Athlete Radio is just constantly seeking the best minds in the world who can then expand upon our understanding of athleticism. That's one thing going there. I got a few more courses in mind for us to expand in the Power Athlete Academy and our understanding of movement. And the Power Athlete Academy, the simple goal is to speak to that coach, trainer, movement enthusiast, and then have them understand and articulate movement, performance, squatting, so that way they communicate it to an athlete, a coach, a parent, whoever needs to understand this. Most likely it's going to be a parent or a sport coach that you can create more opportunity for yourself as a fitness strength coach professional. Social intelligence was the number one goal, and it continues to be for that, to empower you to create more opportunities for yourself and expand your understanding and opportunities to coach. That's one thing, and we're dipping our toes into expanding our virtual coaching reach. We have plenty of programs on through Train Heroic, and now we're going to expand that to empowering one-on-one with virtual coaching experience. Expect to see that here, which is the X factor. It's someone who, instead of just following the program and doing their best, to fine-tuning their execution and then mastering their movement for real under the eyes of a Block 1 coach. So those are a few of the things that we got going on, expanding. We're aiming to get back on the road as well as the in-person clinic. As those opportunities present itself and more coaches and gyms are willing to travel. So expect to see us back on the road, man, and doing what we do best, just drop knowledge bombs, have some fun, and load up a barbell.
Yes, sir. I really wish, on a side note, I would bet good money on this. I really wish you could see your top listeners on the podcast. Because I tell you, since 2000, it was late 2014, I've listened to every one of those fuckers. And I really wish that even in the early years when you guys were knuckle deep in CrossFit, still listening to that. So It's been a great part of my coach's journey, my athletic journey, and I'm glad that we were able to cross paths. And I'm gonna challenge you, if you get some time, Tex, kind of my Cal Dietz, to some extent, a great mentor. Him and Cal Dietz are actually really good friends since we're pretty close in proximity. I have a podcast with Pete Leno. Pete Leno, he has worked, right now works with NHL, works with the MLB, and we've been lucky enough to have him at our small university, and it's by sheer luck that he applied for a force plate grant, got these force plates, and has built it around all of our education. Then he's also built his own company off of it. But some cool things to think about. He did a lot of time in Russia and learned from them, and so just the aspect of what he would consider high-speed eccentric loading. Very, very cool concept about running uphill, backpedaling, doing big things on that end. So if you get some play around time, which I know you don't have a lot, just throw that a listen, my friend.
Well, I got a 6-mile commute a day. I'll chip away at the podcast in the old truck, but yeah, man, no, we're always looking for sweet people like this, and how we don't often seek it. It comes to us through friends, coaches, and connections like yourself.
There you go. Cool, man. Well, I appreciate your time, Tex. That was a lot of fun, my friend. Yeah,
dude. Anything else? Any other burning questions?
No,
as the longest podcast listener of Power Athlete Radio?
No,
self-proclaimed.
I bet good money. Damn it, I'm pretty close. I bet. So no, dude. I think we covered it, my friend. It's been a pleasure. Also, have you guys solidified a date when you sent out those 3 dates for the Block 1 yet?
September.
Okay, perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Cool, man. Yep. Well, last question, I guess. Any Block 1s in Corpus Christi, down that area?
Ooh, I'm not sure. I don't believe so.
Okay.
What do you got going on down there? Trip?
Yeah, I'm going to South Padre and in August, and so I threw the August date out there for the Block 1 because I could just go from there up to Austin. But so if there is anybody, let me know. We're just going down on a trip here once I finish my master's. I'm just getting ready to finish it. So
sweet. What's your final paper on?
So it's an MBA, and we did a final paper on. I did a few, and I got to take the last test. But here the next semester, I'll find out exactly what that is. I did a final paper that was kind of the capstone on why the Vans shoe is a superior shoe in fitness and how Vans has built that culture. And so that was a good one. But
that's awesome.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. It's been a cool experience, and that's what helped get me into the university where I'm at now. So I can't complain.
Yeah, dude. Well, I commend you. MBA, that's a big step. A lot of I would push any strength and conditioning coach enthusiast, or even at the undergrad level, either take a bunch of business classes or get your bachelor's in that. And then go and pursue the best strength coaches you can find and do the internships. But that business acumen will take you a hell of a lot farther than you reading all up the research that you could honestly do on your own.
Exactly. And that's like I said, it's not a prerequisite. It helps getting you into that frame of mind. But I've learned by fire, just trying to open a business and failing. That's the way to do it.
Maybe yeah. Maybe that's the only way to do anything.
Exactly.
But,
well, I appreciate the time, brother. I'm sure we'll catch up, and I'll chat with you tomorrow too.
Sweet. Yeah, man.
Where can
Keep
people
up
find
great
you?
work.
Where can people find you, Tex?
Maine is going to be at Power Athlete HQ on Instagram. You're going to see a bunch of people getting smashed videos or podcast links, and every once in a while some coaching video content. If you want just coaching or a glimpse at my daily life, which is just lifting weights, driving an old truck, coaching, then hit my Instagram. It's at Mcquilkin, which is my last name, Mcquilkin.
Cool, man. Well, that is another episode of the NLX2 podcast. You guys catch up with Tex. He's a wealth of knowledge. And we will chat with you later, dude.
Sweet. Thank you. Bye.